Good morning, everyone. I'm Lewis Kirkaldie from Cinegy, product manager at Cinegy. I'm here to speak to you today with this amazing title of Integrating Legacy Video into File-Based Workflows. There will be a short test at the end, so just to warn you now. Legacy video. What exactly do we mean when we say legacy video? And in many ways, there is legacy video in as much as you've got tapes still in the world on shelves, and they have to come in through tape decks. And just last year, that still felt kind of warm and comfortable and fuzzy, but now we're already thinking, man, tape, that was so 2011. And we're still in 2011, even I meant 2010. But tapes aren't going anywhere because there's hundreds of millions of hours of tape just on shelves around the planet still. And there are still situations where tape still gets used for recording, even today, for where there's still a large fleet of cameras out there that still are tape-based, and various things like HD Cam SR decks that are still recording and still doing things. So the tape world isn't going away in an immediate hurry, even though file-based is chasing it hard now this year. But also at the same time, there are other aspects to what we would consider legacy video, which would be when things are streaming. So when you're at an event and there are cameras actually pumping SDI out, a file-based workflow isn't going to help you there because the camera's playing and you don't want to wait for the end to get the files out of the cameras. So I'm going to take you through a few scenarios that I know and have direct experience with where Cinegy is being used, and talk about some of the problems that happen there, the problems we've come across, and some of the ways that we identify them and work with them. Starting with reality TV, it's something that Cinegy have got quite a lot of experience in, and a Cinegy platform has been used to great effect inside the UK and around the world in helping to manage the specific problems you get with reality TV, born out of the cheapness and availability of the DV world that sprung up. Reality TV made it possible to shoot ratios of rushes that really boggle the mind, that make people just go, oh, I really needed 100 hours of riding in a car with someone to work through and sort through. But it turns out there's a real audience for this, and people want to watch this and want to see this. So it gives some quite unique problems where with reality TV it's really the single biggest identifying factor about it, apart from it being unscripted, which just drives this, we have massive volumes, and then quite often tiny timescales. So if you look at some reality TV shows today, they'll quite often be out following someone around that day, and then want to make a package that evening around it. So other things can be a longer duration, but you have a huge organizational issue to overcome here. You have more content than any one person can physically look at inside your production deadlines, and you have content that needs to get played out, possibly that evening, possibly in a week, possibly you're a few weeks ahead of the play out, but actually that's going to be getting closer and closer and closer as you get towards the end of your run or your series, depending upon the show. So there are genuine, real logistical issues around producing reality content, mainly around the fact that the volumes are huge, it is unscripted, you have to log this, but it brings in a number of issues around trust. So looking at some other scenarios, as we move on to, for example, news, it's another group of people that are trusted to go off and film content often, or work in a small group filming content, and then again, they've got to get that turned around, and they're the ones that are working on this content, and they're the ones that are looking organising their material and get it out. So news, in many ways, if you look at the workflows that get used in these industrial, professional processes, news can be very similar to reality TV, but with a smaller group and with far less huge volumes of material being generated for that. Fundamentally, we often find in some of our news customers that the sheer natural laziness of a human being and or journalist, if you wish to mix the two, drives a reasonable amount of the way that person works. So if they actually bother to white balance the camera and check the audio levels before they record their piece, that means they get to go home earlier and don't have to wait to find someone to correct the colour and sort out the audio. So we found the level of discipline at some of our news sites have been increased in terms of the number of times the camera comes back and the material comes back and it's actually been white balanced and they did check that audio was working, is significantly higher than often happens in reality scenarios where they can just go, well, if we use that clip, someone can deal with that in the Avid and just sort the colour out later. So what we find is that news it means that material can come back in, and then just a small group of people need to work on that. But the really tiny timescales then kick in. So it sounds like they've got themselves sorted. The camera's good. They've lined it up. They're hopefully file based. That's all good. But then quite often they'll be filming something in the morning to be played that lunchtime, or as soon as possible. So that's when tools can really start to be helpful to say, well, how do we take the window it's going to take you to do your job and start cutting lumps of time out of that to get the moment you turn the camera on, or the moment that you left your organization, to the moment that you actually get your story on air. What does that mean, and how can we work on those kind of technologies, and how can we let, for example, your editor that needs to look to see that you haven't libeled an organization and are about to cause him a whole nightmare. How are we letting these people have their content reviewed that they've cut and finished, just to make sure that you're not violating a super injunction on the 1 o'clock news? Before you then move to another scenario here, which is long form. So long form is another scenario similar to the way that the other two may work, and there are many similarities through this. But with a long-form production, instead of having to deal with 100 hours of rushes, in a week or even a day in some quite impressive cases, you might have 100 hours that will come in over a month or over a month and a half. And in that case, you actually have a volume of content that's quite possible and quite feasible for one person to review completely. So you get to the point where you might say, well, excellent, logging will be done by the producer. They could do it in the field, or they could do it when it gets back. And that it's entirely possible that people will be more engaged with their content over that duration. And the way that works then becomes different. You don't have someone that's being a professional logger being trusted to remove sections because it really was just someone filmed the floor for half an hour where the camera tripod drooped. Which in long form, people can often be a lot more protective about their rushes. Like, no, the producer will be the only person that will comp stuff up and throw things away. But the problem you get instead is that sometimes these programs are running for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, even 2 or 3 years. I think the biggest length of duration of production that I've worked with was 25 years, where they actually had a commission that was going to run on until like 2020 or something. And so the problem you start to get then is forgetful humans. I don't know, you may be the same. I struggle to remember exactly what I was doing just a couple of months ago. So trying to remember exactly what clip and what film I did that interview on where that person said something and what was their name again, becomes more of a challenge. The reason for using tools like Cinegy and for using asset management and logging in this particular scenario isn't because the material is too difficult for you to organize as a person, but it's remembering 6 months later which lacy drive did you put the files on, and which clip was it where the person said that, how do I search that, how do I access that, and how do I share that with my team, which is very different from reality TV where it's more about managing the volumes. We can come on to a fourth type I've identified, which is documentaries, which are like news but with more long lunches. So it's very, very similar workflows, very similar style of thinking when building these things, but we've taken away the really tight timescale durations because they're sharing like a long-form production or a reality TV, a commissioning process where there is an arc that's going to be drawn and people are going to be building these documentaries, and so the immediacy is removed, but a lot of the processes and practices can still remain. But in actual fact, in many cases, documentaries can be significantly easier to manage without using asset management, without using professional logging tools, because the volumes will be more manageable and the timescales aren't normally that amazingly long, and there'll be a dedicated team that are paying very careful attention to what they're building. So the problems for documentaries are often less than they would be for news, just because they've got more time and more flexibility, and they're okay with that. But sometimes, you may have a number of these going around. You might have some compliance issues and review required as you go along. So there can still be problems, but it's not as bad as the worst case of reality TV, where you've got literally 1,000 hours coming in 2 weeks, and managing that is interesting. But it brings us then to the final group, the director self-shoot. I've worked with a number of these people, and these people are the people that they cause the the metrics to have problems on the charts, and you look at how this person is working. I have a lot of respect and time for director self-shoot people, but they're the people that will come into your larger organization and really mess up with your planning for what you're trying to introduce for the people doing some of these other jobs. The director self-shoot will come and go, yeah, but you can't take my Mac away, and I'm going to do this the way I do it, and I'm shooting on this camera, and don't mess with me, and I know exactly what I'm doing. And these people, I've labelled them as being like kind of professional home movies, which is it sounds derogatory, but it's really not. These are the people that often produce some amazing content, but these are people to watch out for when you're looking at making perhaps a broader change for your organisation. That in actual fact, you really don't need to do anything for these people. They've got it sorted. They've already worked out how to do editing. They've worked out, they're writing their scripts, they're filming their content, they're doing their recce's. They know what they're up to, and in many cases, the last thing you want to do if you're involved in a technology change is go and mess with these people, because chances are they're smarter than you and they're going to just cause you a heartache. There are some very interesting people that work in this field, and so this is the anti-pitch for Cinegy. If you find yourself sat in this room thinking, well, I'm a director self-shooter, you really don't want any of our technology. Just keep your MacBook Pro that you've probably got, and your XD cam that you've probably got, and your lacy drives, and carry on making great content, because you really don't need a media asset management system, and you don't need these workflows around here, because chances are you've got it worked out, and you know what you're doing, and you don't have to tell anyone else, because you'll just make a great program at the end. So that's the anti-pitch for Cinegy, as you kind of move through the complexity arc of what's going on. And this brings me to my multi-purpose chart, which is useful for when you haven't prepared slides very well and you just want to throw up a chart and go, look, there's charts and graphs and sirens. So, but it does actually demonstrate a very interesting concept that we've discussed over the course of these genres, which is during the course of managing an organization and managing a media process, you can take pretty much anything along the bottom axis of increasing number of many things, and that will cause your complexity to exponentially increase. So if you consider the kind of the documentary might hide somewhere down here where you've got a few people and a number of weeks and tens of hours, but it's not really that complex, and it can still be managed by that one team and their tools. But if you then take news, where you've got like significantly more journalists in a building and more stories coming through in a day and less time, the complexity is going to spike up, and you get all the way to reality, where literally increasing numbers of many things is most likely to be hours of content over short periods of time. So you've got 7,000 hours being ingested in 12 weeks. That really is going to bring your complexity up to a level where you have to have dedicated logging staff, people you're going to trust again to actually make decisions, to comp down, to crop down, to apply appropriate data, just so then a second tier of people doing storyboard production can actually then work on that content. So as an organization, depending upon, if you have an increasing number of many things along the bottom, your complexity is larger and you need some kind of tooling and systems to try and deal with that. But this chart also highlights exactly why the director self-shoot is a dangerous scenario to consider on here, because these people eat complexity for breakfast. But will put strange points on your chart of like, what am I trying to do? Because this person carries out many tasks, does many things, does them very competently, but because they're alone, they can deal with this and ratify this. And I've seen a number of technology change projects get random requirements skewing something that serves the majority of staff in an organization, that we're now addressing kind of director self-shoot, or things that actually aren't broken in your organization, being kind of thrown off the chart of making intelligent decisions on how to move through this. So this comes back to my pitch of how does Cinegy help do this. And Cinegy is all about helping this content production process, follow some simple industrialized paths of making content easily shared, making kind of multiplayer video for people, and doing it on standard commodity IT. So anything that we roll out for Cinegy, you just take normal computers and you put our software on them. There is not special hardware. There's no, you have to buy this particular kind of thing. You just put the stuff on and it just works, which helps keep the cost lower. Because at the end of the day, there is always a cost impact in anything you do. And in this market, I don't have to tell you people, the cheaper you can make your program, the more money you may make, or the higher the chance you will have of getting the initial commission. So at the very heart of what we do, we're all about managing that complexity so that as the increasing number of things grows, that it remains within the realm of the possible on the complexity chart. Now, sometimes that leads to lower costs. Other times, it leads to people just going, awesome, we'll shoot 4 times as much for this reality show. And that's a decision that has to be creatively managed. But the way we do this is by implementing flying men with bits of paper. So this is my kind of slightly kind of bringing people out of it was a chart and then an easy button. It's like some humor, lifting pictures.